everyone. You're listening to The Future of Food Is You, a production of the Cherry Bomb Podcast Network. I'm your host, Abena Anim-Somuah, and each week I talk to emerging talents in the food world, and they share what they're up to, as well as their dreams and predictions for what's ahead. As for me, I'm the founder of The Eden Place, a community that's all about gathering people intentionally around food. I love this new generation of chefs, bakers, and creatives making their way in the worlds of food, drink, media, and tech. Today's guest is Alison Van de Berghe. Alison is the founder of AVDB, a consulting brand focused on supporting women in food and drink. I'm excited to chat with Alison about what it means to be a consultant, our mutual love for Mexico City, and her next opening, a new wine bar in Mexico City's popular Condesa neighborhood. It's called Niv Bar and will be open on Saturday, March 4th. Here's a quick update from Cherry Bomb HQ. The Cherry Bomb Jubilee Conference is taking place Saturday, April 15th at Center 415 in Manhattan. Jubilee is the largest gathering of women in and around the world of food and drink, and this will be our 10th in-person Jubilee. It's also Cherry Bomb's 10th birthday, so there's a lot to celebrate. Jubilee Day is filled with great talks, networking, beautiful things to eat and drink, and lots of opportunities for connection, conversation, and community. I've been to an in-person Jubilee and their virtual Jubilee, and it is definitely a place to meet fellow foodies and make connections for life. Jubilee tickets are on sale right now, so visit cherrybomb.com for more, or click on the link in our show notes. I can't wait to see you there. If you do plan to be there, please come and say hi. Thank you to Kerrygold for supporting The Future of Food Is You. Kerrygold is the iconic Irish brand famous for its rich butter and cheese made in Ireland with milk from grass-fed cows. Let's talk butter first. There's a Kerrygold butter for all of you out there. From soft and spreadable butter in a tub to sticks of salted or unsalted. A perfect measurement option for foolproof cooking. There's a Kerrygold butter blended with olive oil, which is about to become your pantry essential. My go-to is the traditional block of Kerrygold unsalted butter foils, perfect for baking because of that higher butter fat content and because I can control the amount of salt in the specific recipe. Then there's Kerrygold cheese. The options go way beyond their classic Irish cheddar. There's Kerrygold Blarney cheese, which is a Gouda style, Kerrygold Dubliner, sweet and nutty with a bite similar to aged Parmesan, Kerrygold Skellig, a tangy take on cheddar, and the rich and delicious Kerrygold Cashel Blue farmhouse cheese. For the best cheese board, just accompany these with some grapes, your favorite crackers, and some funky jams for contrasting vibes. You're all set. If you haven't tried Kerrygold yet, don't delay. The future is now. Look for their butter and cheese at your favorite supermarket, specialty grocery store, or cheese shop. Visit KerrygoldUSA.com for recipes and product information. Now, let's check in with today's guest. Alison, hello.
Hey.
How's it going?
Great. So happy to be here.
Let's talk a little bit about where you grew up and how food showed up in your life.
Sure. So I am from the Northeast originally, and food has always been really one of my most prominent memories. I mean, my mom actually, after she finished her career in finance, she became a test baker. So growing up, she test bakes for cookbooks. Growing up, we would have a month of different kinds of brownies, a month of different kinds of fudge, a month of different kinds of ice cream, literally for my whole life. So food was always really present in my life. There's this great story that my parents always tell where when I was little and I was playing soccer, one time I came home and told my parents my favorite part of playing soccer was the oranges at halftime. And they're like, we're not driving her there anymore. Like, that's enough. But it's so linked with all my memories, and it's just such an important part of who I am.
Do we know any of the cookbooks that your mom has recipe tested for?
Yes, they're written by Abby Dodge. She's fantastic. The Everyday Baker is probably her most popular, and I know she's a big fan of Cherry Bomb, so yeah.
Yeah. You're still in the Northeast, moving south to D.C., and you're at George Washington University. What was the food scene like there? How did food start to now play a role in college?
So I was always a foodie, but I never imagined myself entering this space professionally. I mean, I majored in international politics. I minored in journalism. That's not really going to gear you towards a career in food. But I did study abroad in Paris, which
dream.
It was amazing. And I took a class at Sciences Po called The Sociocultural History of Food. And it really shifted my perspective on how actually my major and minor can relate to food and agriculture, because it was talking about the migration of different products such as salt or wine. I mean, as a 20-year-old in Paris doing wine tastings for school, that was pretty amazing. But beyond that, I started to see how when you really love international politics, you really love people and culture, food is such a tangible way to exist in that space. So I started to see how when you really care about like wine, for example, you're learning about the economy and the agriculture and the family stories and the history. And so it's just a great way to learn about different cultures around the world.
How was Paris? I'm sure Paris probably brought out so many senses for you.
So many.
Just walking to get a baguette or just going to the marché during the afternoons. That must have been so fun.
It was incredible. I mean, it was really my introduction to wine and my lifelong affair with pastries. It changed everything for me. Like, I really was that girl that came back and was like, I studied abroad. Exactly.
No
but it really did.
Yeah.
I'm still super, I mean, I go back quite often or as much as I can, really. And especially now that I work in wine, I'm so much more interested in my life there. When I was there as a 20-year-old, I had no idea what I was doing. I was just absorbing it all.
Yeah. What are your two go-to spots? What would you consider your, Alison certified gems in Paris?
Gems in Paris, La Vin Comptoir. That's one of my favorite spots.
That's
it's a
such
wine
a good
bar.
place.
Yeah, the Le Sixième, Bistro Palbert. I mean, you can't go wrong with either of those. Best of the best.
And then you're done in DC and Paris. You head to the Bay Area, another wine-adjacent place. What were you up to while you were there?
I got there and I was working for Ogilvy and Mather, a large advertising agency, on their sustainability team. So they had a team called Ogilvy Earth, which we were working on basically building corporate narratives around sustainability. It was super interesting. Really, really interesting intro to marketing and PR, but with an advocacy element and with the sustainability element. And then after 2.5 years there, I transitioned to Wagstaff marketing, which was my intro to the hospitality industry. So that's where I started working in food, wine, restaurants, hotels. It was just diving straight on into the industry.
Yeah. What motivated the change to kind of still stay in sustainability, but now lean more into food and wine?
It was actually a little bit of a crisis for me, just because I thought, do I really want to make my passion my full-time job? I didn't want to ruin the way that I feel about the industry. But really now it's welcome, you're never leaving. It's the best place ever. So I'm so happy that I made that change, even though at the time I was reticent. But it was really just because I'd been a foodie forever and I wanted to give it a try. And once I started, I just realized that there's just an unbelievable amount to explore. And then as I dive deeper into wine, still now, 7 years later, you can't stop. I mean, it's a lifelong learning lesson.
That's amazing. What were some of the projects that you worked on while you were at Wagstaff?
That's what's so cool about working for an agency like that, is that you get to touch so many different things. I worked for a few wineries up in Napa. We helped open a hotel in Palo Alto. We worked on a few openings in San Francisco itself. And then I also worked on some Michelin restaurants in South Bay.
Oh, nice.
I worked with the chocolatier, Racuti, in the Ferry Building.
I've been to that spot.
Yeah, of course
so
you
cool.
have.
I didn't know you were behind that.
Yeah, there's just so many really great places, and you just get to touch so many different kinds of concepts and operators.
Yeah, and SF and the Bay Area, it's so interesting because it's California is the dream for produce, at least in America. So it's really awesome to see the different scales at which wine world's connecting with farming, which is connecting with culinary stuff.
Right.
That's awesome. But again, Bay Area wasn't enough. You had to sow your oats further south. So you head to Chile in 2019. And what were you up to while you were just outside of Santiago?
I moved down to Chile. When I was living in the Bay Area, I just really wanted to dive deeper into wine. I got a certification in wine through my WSET Level 2, which is the Wine and Spirits Education Trust. So you can basically become a sommelier, or you can take the WSET route, which is very similar but without the service element. WSET is more just pure wine knowledge. It's not about working in a restaurant. And when I did that, I loved it, but I wanted to actually go to a vineyard. I just felt like it was learning about the final product, and I wanted to really fully immerse myself. So I did. So I went down to Chile and I worked on a binational. They were an American-Chilean family. They own a vineyard down there, and it's female founded also.
Amazing.
And sustainable. So it
Yeah.
felt like a great fit, and I just loved it.
How did you decide to get those certifications to help you grow your knowledge in wine?
Well, I felt like I kind of do this when I love something. I just really dive in. Wagstaff, also the WSET was a client of Wagstaff. They compensated some of my studies, and I went up to Napa. I studied for the 2 weeks prior. You have your books, and then I did it in 2 days. So you can either take every Monday for 8 weeks with a test at the end, but I decided to study coming up to it and then take the 2 days in person, which ends with an exam. I mean, you try over 45 wines and you just learn so much. I did feel like there is an element to the WSET and a lot of the very classic wine education that leaves out a lot of the more sustainable, organic, biodynamic, and natural practices that I really prefer in the wine world. That's where continuing your education outside of those traditional formats can sometimes be really powerful. It was really great to have that base knowledge.
Yeah.
For sure.
Did you feel like over time you start to pick up notes? Because I feel like just now am I like, wow, I can taste plums in this and cherries in this. And that was like a surprise to me. But I'm curious how you developed your palate as you were continuing to take these classes and take the courses.
Yeah. I mean, my parents really like wine also, so I think I was raised around it a little bit, but I've always had a remarkably strong sense of smell. It's been like my mom always jokes since I was really little, and so she jokes actually that when I was born, she lost part of her sense of smell.
She gave it to you.
And when you finish your WSET, they actually try to encourage you to purchase this box of, it's kind of like essential oils. There's like 300 of them, and you just pick them up and sniff them for memory recall.
Whoa.
So when you're saying that you're knowing those things, you love to bake and you love to cook, so you actually have a much better palate than you probably think.
Maybe I should get started. That could be my new thing.
Yeah, it's really, it's not that like sommeliers or people who work in wine have an amazing sense of smell, not at all. It's just that when we describe something and you can pick it back up, it's just because we're used to pulling forward that word. If I say, oh, it smells like plums, you're going to be, of course it smells like plums. But it's just that process of pulling it forward. You just have to practice it all day. When you start working in wine, you're sniffing like your toothpaste and juices and just everything all the time.
So you keep working at this winery. You moved to Chile. What was it like culturally?
Well, I mean, for me, I've always really been an advocate of the underdog. So Chile is not an underdog in the wine industry. I mean, they're one of the largest producers in the world. But they have 14 different wine regions. So as a country, it's almost as long as the U.S. is wide, and it's just perfect conditions up and down the middle of the country. Mm-hmm. There's no limit to how much wine you can try. And the coolest wines, unfortunately, rarely leave Chile because they're tiny. I mean, at least my favorites are these tiny, cool producers. And they're just amazing. And it's the diversity of grapes, too. Like, the wines that leave Chile that we try are usually these big Bordeaux blends coming from some of the main regions south of Santiago. But my favorite ones are these weird little Riesling babies near the coast. Exactly, like these little small guys that are so much more interesting.
I feel like I've been more of a South African Riesling person, but I'm convinced that Chilean Rieslings are the move. The vineyard, what was it called again for those of us listening?
Kingston Family Vineyards.
So Kingston Family Vineyards. They also had a food program that you were a little bit a part of. What was that process like, combining the wine side and the food program? It was amazing.
Essentially, I was the GM of Kingston. I went down to be their marketing manager, and then the GM got pregnant, so I replaced her. It was just such a fascinating experience and so cool. And the food program was amazing. I got there right as we were opening this really beautiful tourism tasting room, and we had a really great tourism program, and we brought down really serious chefs. The chef, when I first started, she now does special projects for Chef Dan Barber, Blue Hill Stone Barns.
Oh, amazing.
And then our second chef had worked at Noma. She's still in Copenhagen. But beyond that, I mean, our everyday chefs were these amazing Chilean chefs who the produce in Chile is just out of this world.
I'm sure.
It's all very organic. And so the food program there is amazing. And every day I was just looking at how we're pairing, what other small pairings we can do, whether it's chocolate or cheese. We did 3 courses and 5 courses for lunch and dinner.
Wow. That was amazing. Yep. I feel like that must have opened up your palate and just opened up how you cooked as well, because it's like the wine's right there, the food's right there.
Going to the farmer's market every week with the chef to look at the way that they were figuring out what they wanted to make just based on what was so fresh. I don't think I've ever lived in a place before where you're purchasing what's in season every single time.
Yeah, because that's all you have.
Yeah, I was there for a year and a half, and in the U.S., you go to the grocery store and you can buy whatever you want, but in Chile, you're only eating what's fresh, and that's an experience that's just, it totally blows your mind if you've never had that before.
What are some Chilean dishes that were local to that region?
They work a lot with corn. They have a lot of corn. Also, the size of their produce is amazing. So there's this thing called pastel de choclo, which is like a corn cake, I guess, is the direct translation. And it has meat and corn and...
Oh, it's like a savory cake.
Yeah, it's savory.
Ooh, okay.
Savory for sure. And then, I mean, Chile also has a lot of really beautiful ceviches, of course. I lived on the coast, so all of the ceviche and pisco sours in addition to the amazing food and wine. Yeah.
Well, let's go big picture. I know that one of your missions, which we'll talk about when we talk about your consulting company, is about making wine more accessible.
Yeah.
So what's the current state of diversity in the wine industry right now?
It's not great. It's not great. I mean, it's getting better, I think, I hope. I mean, only 14% of California wineries have female winemakers.
Wow.
If you can imagine, that's a pretty liberal place. So if you think about even getting outside of the U.S., how those numbers will decrease. I will say in the last few years, especially since 2020, I do think that there have been such an explosion of grants and scholarships. There are so many great companies like Black Wine Professionals, the Hughes Society, the Roots Fund. There are so many great opportunities now, but there's just such a long way to go.
Yeah. And what do you think those particular institutions are doing well that others can start paying attention to?
Just like naming that we need to start working on this. And I think that the women at the core of these institutions are incredible and they've gotten a lot of attention, which is great, but we just need to be putting more resources into making the industry more diverse.
Yeah. You not only have your wine certification, but you also have your agave spirits certification. I feel like we're in a agave spirits era. What inspired you to also get that certification, and what are you learning about the state of the agave world right now?
An important part of this is I split my time between here and Mexico City, so
the best.
It's the dream. I spent a few months in Oaxaca in 2021. It's kind of by accident that I really fell into the agave spirits world, but I just am obsessed with the culture of agave and agave spirits. I don't think that we grasp how profound it is in Mexican culture. Similarly to what I said to getting my wine certification, I just dove in. I wanted to learn about it and found a certification and got it. And I mean, well, it's again a lifelong challenge to learn about agave spirits. It's such a beautiful industry. It's unbelievable how deep and how profound it is for Mexican culture.
Yeah, I did a tour in 2022 and it was amazing just how sustainable it is naturally and but it's hard too when there's so much demand. It's like, how do you maintain the sustainability while also trying to sell and have this thing be another brand that's part of Mexican culture, like locally and globally as well.
100%. Replanting is everything. I have one of my mezcal clients. They are making their mezcal in Oaxaca from rainwater, replanting initiatives, a lot of community initiatives.
Yes.
Also, we really want to be buying producer-made mezcal and just being wary of how we're sourcing, like how we want to purchase in the U.S. There's not a ton of education on it. So you really have to rely on people that know more than you.
How would you like to see people be more educated, like as a regular consumer when they're thinking of purchasing mezcal?
That's such a great question and just something that needs so much more attention to it, I think. Knowing what you don't know and being comfortable. Same with wine. Like you need to befriend someone in your local wine store or befriend someone who knows about agave spirits and just trust that they can guide you in the right direction to purchase. We really want to be buying ancestral whenever possible, which is the most natural form of making mezcal, and if not, artisanal, but small producers. I mean, I can't say it enough, like small producers for wine, small producers for... you want to be supporting people that are profit sharing with the mezcaleros. You don't really want to have this whole swooping in and you're just buying the product and selling it. Like you really want it to be a sustainable infrastructure with the mezcaleros.
Yeah. Are there any particular mezcal or agave brands we should be looking out for?
Of course. My three favorites that I love to recommend: Yola, female queer-owned, amazing. That's a great brand. Agua Mágica is another one. I first tried it at Cosme, so it's fantastic. And they, again, have really great community initiatives. And the last one is Neta. Neta is another really great brand where they are just working really hard to give back. And the way that they're ingrained in their communities is very cool.
Yeah. For those of you who are listening, Cosme is Enrique Oliveira of Pujol's restaurant in New York City. You started your own consulting brand, AVDB. What inspired you to transition from full-time to starting your own thing?
It was not intentional. Actually, 3 years ago, I was on a plane to Australia to take a quick travel break.
Uh-oh.
How do you think that went?
Well, you tell us.
Yeah. And I was planning to come back to the States, and I wanted to work at Airbnb Experiences, move back to San Francisco. And then fast forward 3 years, obviously that a lot of that didn't happen.
Yes.
What happened was I came home, I was watching the industry pass away, and I was unemployed. I'd left my job in the vineyard. But I mean, if I'd stayed, I would have lost my job even just a few more weeks. And so I started to just freak out and reached out to a few different people to try to see what I could do. And one of those people was Elizabeth Tilton with Oyster Sunday.
Yes.
And I just felt like she was doing great things to change the industry, and I wanted to get involved. And so I started consulting. And then I had a few other clients and kept consulting some social impact wine brands. I started working with Kevin Zraely. He's a wine educator.
Oh, very cool.
Just doing what I could, and then it really just snowballed into a full-blown company without me realizing
Yeah. What's the mission behind AVDB?
Yeah, one of my favorite topics. So AVDB is a marketing and business development company where we work with social impact female and minority-owned brands. So we specialize in marketing, PR, copywriting, newsletters, etc., partnership work for social impact female and minority-owned brands.
That's amazing. What inspired you to go in that direction? I mean, I feel like you'd come out working for a female-owned brand, but, it's one thing to really double down on that, especially as you're starting out a new brand.
Of course. I mean, I think it was always my natural inclination. Like, when I look at my career and the women that inspired me and just the companies that I've always admired, those were the spaces they were in. I think also with my degree or working in sustainability, like advocacy and some sort of making a greater meaning of it all has always been important to me. So I just realized that all of the people I were working for fell in those categories, and that's what I really wanted to do, and that's what lights me up. It gets me out of bed in the morning. Then once I put my stake in the ground, it just people that care about that began to come to me. Yeah. And so it just keeps flowing, really.
Yeah. You mentioned social impact, and I feel like, especially if you're plugged into the food world, it's one of those words that it can actually bear fruit, where it's like people are working on using these brands to change the dynamics of food. But sometimes it can also feel like another sticker to just make their brand seem more in touch or seem much more in touch with the times.
Yeah.
How do you think about social impact when you're working with your brands, and how do you try to bring that out of your clients and their work?
That's such a great question. There's a bunch of different ways to go about it. I would say my favorite brands to work with are brands before they're big, smaller brands that are trying to figure out who they are. And hopefully, if we're working together, we're mission aligned enough that they care about this too. And so it can be everything from encouraging partnerships with like-minded people or community initiatives. Depends on what they're in. For example, the mezcal brand that we're working with, the way that they're approaching the rainwater collection and how they're giving back to their communities is amazing. There was a brand that I worked with, Shoefly, where my client was a diplomat. And the whole point of the brand was to provide more economic stability for mostly female winemakers in Bolivia.
Wow.
So exporting those wines and working in that space was just so powerful. And yeah, I mean, I think it's everything from your ethos to your day-to-day actions, inclusivity, to giving back, not necessarily in donations either, but in a way that's just meaningful in the communities that you're in.
Yeah. Teach a man to fish versus give a fish.
That's exactly what the founder always used to say. Yeah.
I want to talk to you a little bit more about PR and social media. So as you've been building out your consulting brand and thinking a lot about putting your brands out there, how do you think about social media in terms of the narrative that you want to spread?
Necessary, I would say, is probably the easiest way to put it, or the simplest way. Influencers change the game for sure. I mean, obviously, as we see Instagram developing its rules and changing its algorithms, that's a whole different conversation. But I would say that it's just a necessary presence, like with doing a lot of restaurant marketing too. that's where people go. That's how people are finding out about things. Like when I see friends on trips in a place I've never been, I'm marking in my Google Maps all of the places that they're eating if there's someone that I trust. So I just think it's an easy access, and it's meeting consumers where they're already at because they're going to be online anyway, right?
Yeah. I'm curious to hear, how do you maintain a sense of sustainability while also giving influencers a chance to share about a restaurant? Because I feel like we're now entering this era of de-influencing, where people are like, don't listen to influencers anymore.
It's tricky. I would say I have personally seen more influencers become less of a like they've moved away from a specific niche. For example, I've seen former food people become more wellness people, or influencers become more into design in addition to food, or just be more holistic. Like, we're holistic people. If I was posting on my Instagram, and I mean, I'm not an influencer, it would have very diverse subjects of what I'm working with, right? The way that I talk about them specifically for work would really just be, I think that influencers can reach new markets in a way that's effective. But beyond that, especially we do a lot of openings. When you work on openings, you really do want that scan of the room. Video content's really hard. They are creators. They're artists in their own way. And I'm not trying to do video content for my clients because I'm not going to be good at it.
Someone has to pour the wine. So
yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
I want to talk a little bit more about the profiles of the clients you work with.
Sure.
Can you tell us about one or two clients that you're really excited about right now and the types of projects that you're working on?
Yeah, I mean, we don't have enough time in the day, but one of my recent new clients that I'm really excited about is a canned wine company, but it's different in that they are canning already known, very popular natural wines, and they're canning them for sustainability purposes. So using aluminum versus glass actually cuts CO2 emissions by 79%.
Wow.
So the whole point is, first, you can drink less by drinking cans. You don't need to open a full bottle. Secondly, shipping is very expensive and bottles can be heavy. So the idea of working with aluminum is just really smart and creative. But that client, they're called Juice Wines, DJUCE. Their whole thing is about breaking barriers. Like, it's just about breaking glass, but it's also about making wine like cool and not as pretentious. They partner with cool artists who design the cans in these beautiful ways. Yeah. And so it's a really refreshing, like, kind of a Gen Z approach to wine. But I think that's cool because we need to start entering this. Yeah. We need to meet them again, like where they are. Yeah.
The Gen Z thing, because I feel like we're also entering the era of the sobriety movement, I would say. Right. I feel like sobriety has already been prevalent, but I feel like in the last, I would say, year,
totally,
more people are declaring that they're not drinking anymore. We're seeing more proliferations of mocktail menus at bars. People are thinking of different ways to not incorporate drinking. How does the wine industry think about that as well? Because I feel like you have to pay attention to consumer behavior, especially in that perspective.
You have to. I mean, I think there are a few different ways to look at it. The first would be that cans are exploding. I mean, I remember meeting with a canned wine company in 2020 who told me that their largest issue was finding cans because there's just everyone's canning things right now. And that's smaller portions. For me, I do a lot of virtual tastings and I don't want to open a bottle on a weeknight. And so if I have a can around that I can use, it's just so much easier. But secondly, I think that the wine industry needs to be prepared to have a shift. I think that outside of sobriety, a lot of younger generations, they really care about the why. These companies need to think about their farming practices, their sustainability. What are they doing for the earth? What makes them a brand that you want to consume outside of their flavor? I really think those things are super important. So I think that it's meeting younger generations' interests in that way because, I mean, it's obviously I share that, but I think that it's really important for brands to consider the why of what they do, not just the actual physical product itself.
Yeah. I want to talk about the city guides that you've made. You've made these incredible city guides on your website. How do you think about travel as it intersects with your work?
It's all research and development, baby. So just getting out there and trying everything. If you go back to how I mentioned studying international politics, and it's just so important to keep moving. I'll always quote Bourdain and just talk about how you got to get out of your shoes and eat something different and go to a corner market and have someone cook you food in a place where you don't even know where you are and just get out there. I think that meeting people that way is just the most profound way to connect to a culture. that's wine, one. If you work in wine, that's something that you share with other wine people. But how can you understand food or market food or operators if you're not really grasping why they do what they do or their inspiration? And if you ask a chef their inspiration, it's sometimes that they've been abroad or where else they've worked or how else they've traveled. And you don't need to spend $1 million either.
That's amazing. Well, how do you hope that people continue to use your guides as they're traveling?
Well, I mean, we write them, and I have on my website that we write them with the intention of highlighting female and minority-owned and also sustainable travel. We really work hard to rep brands that we really care about in that way. So I think it's just guiding people to not fall into tourist traps, not to spend too much money if they don't need to. I mean, you can go to amazing places and not do that. And just to be intentional in the way that they travel. I mean, for me, I'm the friend that I'm planning like 3 meals ahead.
Oh, same.
That's my love language, and that's what's important to me. But yeah, just giving people good options. Also, selfishly, when people were coming to Mexico City all the time, and I couldn't bring them out to dinner. I was like, here's my list.
I have my Google Doc. I think I've sent it to like 30 people.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like, I'm not there. This will work.
Exactly.
Yeah, do what I did. Yeah.
Exactly.
I want to talk to you a little bit, too, about female entrepreneurship because I think it's so important. It's just so amazing to see the different stories and inspirations that get women to build the things that they're excited about. How have you found community in food and wine?
It's one of my favorite communities. I've been listening to Cherry Bomb for years. I've always tried to be very active in communities like Cherry Bomb or Pineapple Collaborative, or even there's a Facebook group called Women in Hospitality. That's actually how I met Elizabeth Tilton. Yeah, just thinking about all these groups that exist and going alone, just showing up. The other day I was at a client wine tasting and there was a woman that came alone and I just went over and said hi. And now we were chatting, went to a yoga class. That's how it works sometimes.
Yeah.
And I think you just have to be inclusive and just keep showing up. And if you really care, one of my clients always jokes that young people, especially in wine, we're so desperate for other young people in wine because it's such a strange and just esoteric place to work that we're desperate for these connections. And so even last week, I was lucky enough to dine at Claude and I got to meet.
Oh, that's such a great spot.
It was fantastic. 9:45 p.m. res, but we got there.
That's how you do it. Yeah. Only New York.
Exactly. A great restaurant in New York. But the sommelier that was helping us, now we're friends on Instagram because it's just when you find other young women that work in wine, I want to connect with all of them.
Yeah. Something I love asking on the podcast is who people are inspired by. It's always nice to know who is motivating you to change the future.
Well, in the wine space particularly, I mean, Jancis Robinson was really the original woman in wine. I mean, she was in the industry when there were no women in wine, and it inspires me to see trailblazers like that for sure. On a personal level, there have just been a lot of women in my career that have encouraged me or inspired me. One of my first managers at Ogilvy, Evie Morales, she was really the first person that I saw outside of the corporate world go and do her own thing. We reconnected 2 years ago when I started to do this too, and it just felt like we had so much to bond over. I know I keep mentioning Elizabeth, but Elizabeth was one of my first partners in working in this space 2 years ago, or almost 3 years ago. Bevan Bunch is another partner who I work with. She works at New Deal Hospitality on the West Coast. I sent her a cold email, and she just has been such a great friend and partner since. And then sounds kind of cliche, but my mom. I mean,
not at all.
Moms
are the best.
She's the best, and even last night I'm like, Mom, I can't believe I'm going to be on Cherry Bomb, and she's just like, she listens to Cherry Bomb every week. She's listened to it every week for years.
That's amazing.
Sharing this with her, the culture aspect. She lived in Mexico City for years. She speaks a few languages, and just is such an interesting and fantastic person. She's so humble, so kind.
Shout out to the moms. Moms make it happen.
We love them.
Well, you brought up Mexico City, which I feel like is our connecting point.
Right.
I still remember our first friend date in Mexico City. So you've been in Mexico for 2 years. Why Mexico City?
I came back from Chile due to the pandemic and came back home to the Northeast. I just was dying and itching to get back to Latin America. I really love it down there, and Mexico is much closer than Chile. Also a place that I can work a little bit easier than Chile. It's just so far away. It is just filled with such beautiful culture. I feel so strongly about how all the corners of Mexico and the history of Mexico is just absolutely insane. And like I mentioned, my mom lived there when she was in her 20s and grew up with all these like Frida in the house and all these different things that I didn't realize were so Mexican until now. It's just such a happy place, happy people, incredible hospitality. Really one of the best cities, I think, in the world to eat and drink. It's just an amazing place.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. Can you tell us a little bit about the state of food and hospitality in Mexico City now?
Yeah, of course. I mean, it's only blowing up. It keeps growing and growing and growing. A lot of people obviously have moved to Mexico City in the last few years, but beyond that, I can't even believe it. Like when I was gone for a month last summer, and when I came back, there were 2 new restaurants on my block alone. It's amazing to see the expansion and also the diversity. Last week, like a Jewish deli opened.
Yes, a friend of the pod, Zoe Kanan, was working on it.
Mendel. And so seeing that open. But then also there's just really great restaurants development besides these to-go concepts. It's endless.
Yeah.
I have friends come into town and they're like, oh, have you been here? And I've never heard of it.
I feel like there's been this great debate, too, about it's becoming more culturally recognized globally, and that's causing this like whole debate, especially with a lot of locals, in terms of it's great that we're getting this influx in our economy, but at the same time, it's affecting how Mexican culture is being perceived, rents, gentrification, all that stuff. How do you think food is helping or hurting that part of the debate?
That's a big question. Mexican food will never ever go away. It's the most amazing thing. I mentioned these concepts just now, a pizza concept or a Jewish deli, which are amazing and they're going to land really well with certain demographics. But the expansion of other Mexican concepts, if you look at Enrique Olvera's story, when he's on Chef's Table, he talks about how he came back from abroad and tried to open this really high-end restaurant, and he felt like he was forcing it. And when he started making authentic Mexican food, that's when he really shone. And then now that's Pujol. Food, in terms of the global economy, I don't think that there's a way that it can really compete in terms of how strong Mexican culture is, but it really can just add. I think that it will hopefully just continue to just be more equal space to more diversity.
Totally.
Because even when my mom lived there, when she came to visit, I brought her to my favorite pastry shop. And my mom just couldn't even believe that there were all these amazing pastries in Mexico City, because when she lived there, that besides the conchas, a very traditional Mexican pastry, there weren't as many.
Yeah.
And there's just such an expansion and influence in the global food scene in Mexico City, which I think is great, because I don't think that it will ever interrupt how strong the Mexican culture is.
Well, you are about to join all the restaurants and wine bars in Mexico City, and you have a really exciting project that you're opening soon. Can you tell us a little bit about it?
Yeah. I am partner owner of a new restaurant wine bar that's called Niv. So Vin backwards, VIN, it's NIV.
That's genius.
And we are opening officially on Saturday, March 4th. I'm so excited. This is my 13th opening that I've worked on in my career.
And it's yours now.
The first one where I actually I'm partner owner, and I can't be more excited. I mean, it feels surreal.
Yeah. After all the learnings you've taken, what inspired to kind of now make this your own thing?
Well, I was brought into the project with a few other owners and partners, so I wasn't there from the inception, but I think as time went on, they saw that wine bars have been really my specialty. I think this is the 4th that I've worked on.
Oh, exciting.
And obviously the wine background, so it was just the right time and the right place, honestly.
Yeah. If you could describe the mood board or the inspiration behind the menu and the wine program, what are you hoping that guests will feel and expect when they walk in?
So the wines are really beautiful and traditional. I would say that there's a lot of French wines, Italian wines, but we also have a lot of Mexican wines too, which I think is very important when you're opening a concept. If I'm at a restaurant in Mexico and there's a big wine list and no Mexican wines, to me, that's a big red flag. Also, it's very affordable, which I think is super important. And speaking of Sartoria, which is a really fantastic Italian spot in Roma Norte in Mexico City, our chef used to work there.
Oh, so cool.
The space will also be used a lot for pop-ups. The chef is very eager to have residencies. So we're really hoping to have different, whether it's a winemaker's come and do a dinner, or, for example, my mezcal client could come and do a pop-up, or we can have a weekend or a week where a chef comes from another place and can join us. So I think that's really exciting. Same thing with art. We did some pop-ups for Art Week, which was a few weeks ago in Mexico City, and just feeling like the vibe can shift in there, not only from the food and wine perspective, but also from the actual physical space. It's just, I'm so excited. It feels like the opportunities are endless.
That's amazing. What were some places or things that inspired you as you were building out this space?
The center feature of the bar is this really beautiful semicircle. So when you walk in, there's this really beautiful marble-looking semicircle. And then the walls are this really soft green. We have some greens and oranges in the inside. One of my best friends did the interior design, which is amazing.
Oh, amazing.
And so it just feels really soft. I love how it really blends this feeling of these like feminine and masculine tones on the inside. It's just really beautiful.
Wow.
And then in the back room, we actually have a speakeasy. So the front is this bar and restaurant, and in the back, we're going to have like vinyl and mezcal and candlelit, and it's like a completely different room.
You're speaking my language. I'm going to become a regular. Yeah,
I'm
excited. Well, I feel like you're the expert on Mexico City, and I feel like I've gotten such great recs from you. And I feel like Mexico City is a spot that a lot of people are heading to. What are 3 favorite spots that you're loving right now?
I have my forever favorites, but then it changes on a weekly basis. I would say the 3 that I'm consistently extremely loyal to, the first is Ellie's.
Yes.
So Ellie Frazier, she is a friend. She's actually from New York. She has a really, really beautiful restaurant in Juarez, and the team there is just fantastic. The former beverage director is a very good friend, and it's just, they make you feel like home, and the food is always fantastic. The second place would be Saint, the one I just mentioned before. Amazing pastries. I love seeing a space like that pop up in Mexico. It's just seeing how they have both Mexican-inspired things and very French-inspired pastries coexist is very beautiful. And the quality is amazing. And then the third would be Loop, which is my favorite natural wine bar. It's fantastic, and the team they really make you feel like home, and there's just always new stuff there that excites me so much. I saw a bottle there a few weeks ago that was from a small vineyard I stopped in last summer in Burgundy, and I just can't even believe that it made it to Mexico, and I was so excited. So Loop and Joaquin is the chef there, and the food is incredible too.
Yeah, those are all great spots. They both encompass Mexico City and how cosmopolitan that it really is.
Yeah.
I want to go back to the bar stuff again. It's not an easy task to open a bar, I'm sure.
No.
What were some challenges and also the triumphs that came?
Yeah, well, I think that's something that's so crazy about being on the operator side and not just helping with marketing like I have in the past with openings, is there's just so many details. You could spend hours and hours thinking about the faucets and the doorknobs and the hooks under the bar and how to make it feel both comfortable and efficient and hiring. And there's just so many things to think about. It's really a challenge. I mean, I think from the triumphs, I feel really strongly about how great our team is. Our team is just amazing. Our GM was the former director of food and beverage at Pujol.
Oh, amazing.
And she's amazing. I'm so happy it's a woman also.
What's her name?
Enela.
Nice.
And then some of the challenges I would just say are timelines. I mean, similar with all the openings I've been working on recently, everything is delayed. Just keep getting more and more delayed. But I think we did a really good job, and we pushed it a little bit. Like the Art Week pop-ups, we didn't do food. We just did limited wine and 2 cocktails just to get people in the space. And I'm glad that we did that, even though at the time it felt like we were nowhere near ready.
How are you hoping that NIV fits into the greater Mexico City food and restaurant scene? And then how are you hoping to see the food scene in Mexico City transform in the next 5 to 10 years?
Our staff is just amazing at NIV, so I feel really excited that they come from such great backgrounds, and they're all, our bartender Roxanne, he's just amazing also. Our chef Diego, like the whole team is great. I hope that we can provide a new space for people to come. The other huge benefit is one of our partners also has an import company. So our pricing for our wines are really reasonable because we don't have that middleman. The wine pricing is really great, which I feel really excited about because there are other wine bars that can get really pricey in Mexico City. So it's more accessible, which I love. I really want the wine culture to increase in Mexico City. It's on its way. And there's amazing wine coming out of Valle de Guadalupe, like you mentioned.
Yes.
And I really want more people to see that. I want more people to be drinking Mexican wine. So I think that's important. And to your second question about the growth of the Mexican restaurant scene, I think it's the increase of access to wine, lower prices to wine, but also just bringing more people down to see how amazing it is. I mean, They don't need any more marketing. Like Mexico City's doing just great. It's doing just great. But I think it's just people seeing how beautiful it is and appreciating how complex and just culturally rich the Mexican food scene is.
Alison, we're about to do our fun Future Food Is You tradition. We're calling it the Future Flash 5.
Okay.
The future of wine bars.
Great.
The future of hospitality.
Improving.
The future of sustainable travel.
Challenging.
The future of women in wine.
Inspiring.
The future of vineyards.
Sustainable.
Well, Alison, thanks for having this amazing conversation with us. I've learned so much about wine, Mexico City, hospitality. If we want to keep supporting you, where are the best places to find you?
Well, my company is called AVDB, which is challenging, but it's actually my initials. We are on the socials to AVDB Co. That's our Instagram, and then our website's actually the same. It's avdb.co, C-O, no M. My email is Alison, ALISON, @avdb.co. My Instagram is AlisonVDB, so it's a theme here.
We love it. We love a good name. Amazing.
Thanks so much.
Before we go, our guest is going to leave a voicemail at the Future of Food mailbox, just talking to themselves 10 years from now. You have reached the Future of Food Is You mailbox. Please leave your message after the beep.
Hi, Future Al. Taking a moment to leave you a voicemail on Cherry Bomb's podcast. Can you believe it? I hope that wherever you are, you can take a moment to pause and feel deep gratitude for where you've been and where you are now. I hope that you can feel gratitude for the women who have inspired you along the way, who have gone out of their way to help you from the kindness of their hearts. Gratitude for how hard you've worked, not only in what we call work, but also for yourself, your mental health, your physical body, and for the strong relationships and friendships you have around you. I also hope that you feel gratitude for the missteps along the way that were really just steps. Lastly, I hope that by the time you're listening to this podcast 10 years from now, there will be less of a need to add the word female before the word founder or winemaker or chef or otherwise, and that the industry will see everyone for who they really are, which is just someone who is great at their trade.
That's it for today's show. Do you know someone who you think is the future of food? Tell us about them. Nominate them at the link in our show notes, or leave us a rating and a review and tell me about them in the review. I can't wait to read more about them. Thanks to Kerrygold for sponsoring the show. Visit kerrygoldusa.com for more. The Future of Food Is You is a production of the Cherry Bomb Podcast Network. Thanks to the team at CityVox Studios, executive producers Carrie Diamond and Catherine Baker, and associate producer Jenna Sadhu. Catch you on the Future Flip!